Yay, it worked. Yay, it worked. Yay, it worked. Oh god, I'm hearing so many echoes. Oh god, I'm hearing so many echoes. Oh god, I'm hearing so many echoes. Let's see. Let's see. You know, I only have one. Let's see. Is the volume okay? Is the volume okay? Is the volume okay? Is the volume okay? Still really new with this, so I'm not entirely confident. Not entirely confident. Not entirely confident. Not entirely confident. Okay. 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 What if I minimize this? Minimize this? Minimize this? Minimize this? Minimize this? Minimize this? What is that? Okay, that got rid of the double audio. Perfect. Okay, I know it has been way too long since I have done one of these. I think if I looked correctly at the last video here, yeah, the last one that I uploaded, oh god, was the end of April last year. Which is definitely kind of my fault. I had just started a new job at the time after being sick for a while. So I kind of got stuck into that and life and BS and more sickness and more health problems, blah, 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 blah. All that fun stuff that you probably don't want to hear about. But I finally have a more stable day off schedule. So I'm really hoping that this will actually stick. I'm hoping to try and do this at least once a week, either on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, which is my normal day off. So we will see what happens. Again, I am hoping for the best, but we'll see how it works. Couple new little updates other than that. I am in a slightly different area. I moved my desk around, so things are a little bit different. So it's not that bad. But probably the biggest improvement is I have an actual microphone. Dun, dun, dun. So that part's really cool. I don't like the fact that this light is so stupidly bright, though. Like, even with some duct tape on it, it's still, obviously you can still see the shine. It's awful. And it's even worse if I take that duct tape off. Like, it's so much brighter, it's kind of blinding my eyes. I already have sensitive eyeballs as it is, so, bleh. But any hoozles. Like I said, I know it's been a while. It's been a hot minute. Hi, Gigi. I got my little puppy. She's gonna be next to us while I read. I don't think I've ever shown you her. Gigi! Hey! Come here. Let me show you to the audience. Hello, babies! That is my little babies. Yeah. And she usually just sits right there while I just sit here at the computer. So it's really sweet, it's really cute. She is a retired racer that my spouse and I got oh god, 5 years ago now, I think? Yeah, about 5 years ago. You're such my old lady. Yes, you are. You're my little old lady. Yeah. So, Yeah, so she was 4 when we got her. Now she's 9, so she's definitely a bit up there in age. Greyhounds sadly don't live too long. They live 10 to 12 years. I mean, the longest one on record was 20? So I'm honestly hoping that she stays around for much, much, much longer than the average, but time can only tell, right? Okie dokie. Ah, what? Who's messing at me? Why? Okay, cool, whatever, I don't care. So, also, I will apologize if there is any sort of lisp. I did go through a small duration of having braces, so now I have my retainers, and I just got my retainer fixed because it broke, so it's a little tight and everything, so I might have a little bit of a lisp because I have to wear it for a while now. Again. Eventually, again, if I can keep this going better than I was, my spouse and I are going to try and look into getting like a little Bluetooth dongle for the computer that I have. Because as much as I like this little headset and it's super convenient because it's small, it has another microphone. And I don't mind it for the simple tasks, but for something like this, I'd rather keep using my new microphone. So eventually, we're going to work on that Bluetooth dongle, and I will be wearing this lovely headset at some point. That is the hope. Because personally, to me, this looks so much cooler. Oops, that just popped on my earbud. But that is an eventual thing, like down the line, when we actually have money saved up and we can actually do it and blah blah blah. Okay, I think that's about enough chit-chatting, whatever. I don't know. I'm so new to this, I don't know what I'm doing. Get back in there. Okay, so we are going to go back to the book. If you don't remember, because I know it's been a while, it's The Land of Elyon, Book 1, The Dark Hills Divide by Patrick Carman. Da-da-da. Last time, we got to chapter 8, and at the end of the chapter, oh god, what's her name again? Alexa had just written to her mom about the spyglass that she not only stole, but also is hoping to try and fix. And now, we are going to hopefully be getting into the part of the book where things start kind of picking up a bit more. Oh gosh, what was his name? Purvis Kocher. Remember how much of a dick he was in the last couple chapters? His role is definitely not done. Trust me. So, now that we've kind of reiterated, got back into this and everything, how about we go ahead and get started? So, sit back, relax, take a drink of your nourishing liquid, mine is water. And let's continue on with Chapter 8, The First Jackal. Chapter 8, The First Jackal. Chapter 8, The First Jackal. Chapter. The next day, Bridwell became empty again, with the last of the visitors streaming out of the gates toward home. As I walked around, I saw Purvis and his men raising and lowering different gates, checking identifications, searching carts, and generally controlling the flow of people out of Bridwell. I had to admit, He ran a tight ship, and his men seemed more than agreeable to follow his lead. During my morning stroll around town, I noticed Silas waiting his turn at the Lathbury gate, and I ran to his cart to greet him. I had given him my letter at breakfast, and he had been more than happy to get on the road and deliver it personally to my mother's front gate. Your father has a package for her as well, so she will be pleased to hear from you both, he said. If only he knew how unhappy my mother was sure to be after reading my letter. I arrived at the side of his cart and looked up at him. It looks as though you have a bit of a wait getting out of town. 6 carts in front of yours, and the sun's already baking the leather off your boots. I'm a traveling man, Alexa. Always have been. Being on my cart with Maiden and Jazz pulling me around is fine by me, no matter the weather, said Silas. Try not to get those old sawhorses into any races on the way home. They might go belly up this time and leave you stranded, I said. Stop making fun of my horses, yelled Silas. He was right. It was a careless attempt at being witty, a bad habit I had picked up from my father. Sorry, Silas. I moved in front of Maiden and Jazz and patted their noses softly. And sorry to you, too. You are grand steeds, head and shoulders above all the other horses in the Bridwell barn. This put a smile on Silas's face, and he gave me a wink. I liked Silas. He was my kind of mail carrier. The gate opened, and carts lurched forward. I jumped out of the way so the horses could advance, and they stumbled forward a few steps, now 5 carts away from being set free on the road to Lathbury. Silas had some waiting left to do, and I decided to head back to the library before my reading spot became so hot I would sooner fry an egg on my chair than sit on it. Upon arrival, I went to see Grayson, but he was strangely absent. His office was in its normal state, half-prepared books piled up all over, various tools strewn about, a sweater half hanging, half falling off a chair. He had been in, that much was for sure, since it was he who opened the library every morning. He must have stepped into the kitchen for something to eat. I shrugged my shoulders and walked in the direction of my chair, stopping on the way to retrieve a volume of stories and a favorite book of poetry. I also had Warvold's book with me, which I planned to spend the better part of the morning browsing through. Safely tucked into my chair, I had a brief moment of anxiety as I realized the possibility of another encounter with Purvis. This time, Grayson was not in the library to save me. Just as I was nursing this unpleasant thought, Sam jumped up onto my lap, followed a second later by Pepper. They purred and dug their heads into my chest, looking for all the scratching they could get. I kept rubbing Pepper's belly, only to have him turn and force his head out of my hand. "Since when did you cast off belly rubs?" I said out loud. He just kept pushing his head into my chest, and then Sam started with the same routine. I grabbed them both by the nape and lifted them up to my face. I stared them in the eye, and they each gave a single meow. Then my gaze focused down to the jeweled collars and the medallions hanging from them. For a moment I went cold, paralyzed, as I'd been when I'd realized Warvold was dead. "Meow, meow," the cat screamed. I'd forgotten I was still holding them both up by the backs of their necks. I set them both down and apologized as I tried to gain my composure. The cats sat at attention, and I took their collars in my hands. The medallions were each about an inch square. One was green and one red. They were adorned with beautiful alternating patterns. Since the cats had belonged to Rennie, it was certainly possible that the medallions contained Jocastas. I was beside myself with anticipation about what they might reveal, and I knew exactly where I could find what I needed to unlock the mystery of the gems. I leapt up, quickly placing the cats on the chair and pointing my finger at them. "Don't go anywhere, you two," I said. "I'll be right back." I ran down the zigzag aisles of books towards the front of the library. When I arrived at the door to Grayson's office, I was overjoyed to find that he had yet to return from what I could only assume was a raid on the kitchen. I crept into his office and slid open the drawers to his desk. Grayson was more of a slob than I had imagined. The first 2 drawers were completely jammed with wads of paper, spines from old books, and various tools in ill repair. One drawer after another turned up the same collection of junk. The last drawer I looked in contained a half-eaten sandwich ripe from at least a week of neglect. It smelled worse than PKB, Purvis Codger breath. I slumped back in Grayson's chair and scanned the shelves, also loaded with old books and other junk. At the end of one shelf was a wooden box with a latch. The box had been untouched for some time, and the lid was covered with dust. Upon opening it, I found a number of old tools, and the one thing I had been looking for, a printer's glass ring. It was just the thing for viewing a Jocasta. Powerful and precise, the printer's ring was used to magnify broken type and aid in the meticulous filling in of old letters on a printed page. Grayson had long since given up the practice in favor of making the books look good on the outside. Good riddance to fixing type, he had told me several summers ago. Nobody cares. It's making me old. I closed the box and was just about to place it back on the shelf when I heard the library door open. Footsteps approached as I fumbled with the box, and I almost dropped it to the floor with a bang before safely replacing it where I had found it. I pocketed the printer's glass ring just as Grayson appeared in the doorway. He grinned, rubbing his belly. A red, sticky-looking substance crowned his gray mustache. I tell you, Alexa, that kitchen makes the best fresh strawberry jam anywhere. I could eat it on baked rolls all day. From the looks of Grayson's belly, he had been partaking of the Rennie Lodge culinary delights on a frequent basis. You better cut back on the kitchen raids, Grayson. Your walk is turning into a wobble. Don't make fun of old people. It's in bad taste. We both smiled as he entered the office. What are you doing in here anyway? He continued. If you're looking for something to eat, check the bottom right drawer. Fresh victuals from the chef. Under normal circumstances, I would have had me fooled. But since I already knew the drawer contained a most rancid surprise, I passed on his offer and bid my farewell. Please be there, cats, please be there, cats, I repeated as I walked back to my chair. I turned the corner and saw them sitting at attention, waiting for my return, just as I had left them, licking their paws absently. My hands shook as I removed the tool from my pocket and positioned myself on my knees in front of the cats. Taking Sam's medallion in hand, I placed the printer's glass against its face and squinted into the device. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a jumble of dots and intricate lines. Then, I focused the glass ring by turning it on its dial with a tick, tick, tick. The tiny dots and lines came together to form a wave of pathways, but there was no clear beginning or end, and no indication of what their purpose was. Just a scattered collection of winding trails. Could it be the streets of Birdwell? Or maybe the pathways along the wall? There was a miniature sparkling mountain at the end of one dotted pathway, but that was the only clear suggestion of a place I could find. Rennie really had been talented. This was an amazing piece of hidden artwork. I raced back to Grayson's office to borrow an ink pen and some paper, returned and meticulously duplicated the map on a full sheet. My lower back burned with pain from stooping over, my eyes watered from the intense scrutiny of the Jocasta. I can now understand why Grayson had given up the process of fixing broken type. Finally happy with my depiction of the etching in the Jocasta, I placed it on the sill so the ink could dry. I stood with a creak, my back screaming as I reached for the ceiling to stretch out my crumpled body. I was finished investigating Sam's medallion, so I got back down on my knees and hunched in front of Pepper. As I went to place the gem in my hand, Pepper violently screeched and lashed out with a bared claw, ripping a cruel scratch across the back of my hand. Wincing in pain, I scrambled back, lost my grip on the painter's glass, and hurled it as I jerked my hand away. I heard it hit, and the pain in my hand was nothing compared with the crashing disappointment of hearing the lens pop against the stone wall. Even worse, I heard Grayson running down the aisles of books in my direction, hollering my name over and over in a worried tone. I had only enough time to grab the printer's glass and see that the lens was covered with a spidery crack. I struggled to my feet and pocketed the second item I had stolen in the span of only a few days that had ended up broken. "What's going on back here?" asked Grayson as he rounded the corner. "I haven't heard either of these cats screech like that in years." Then he saw my hand. "Oh my, that's a deep one. What did you do? Pull his whiskers out?" I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, blood oozing down my arm. Then I realized I'd left the map I'd drawn sitting on the windowsill, and I moved between it and Grayson to block it from view. "I guess he was just in a bad mood today," I said. "Let me take a look. Make sure you're not going to bleed to death." Grayson took my hand and moved into the light at the windowsill. I stammered a little, but couldn't find the right words to stop him. "Calm down," said Grayson, and then he was examining my hand in the warm light, turning it and dabbing it with his handkerchief. "I think you'll be all right," he said. "It's actually not so bad, only looks terrible. Best thing for it is to leave it out in the open so it can scab over. In a few days you will hardly notice it except for the itching." Then he let go of my hand, gave me a long, solemn look, and said, "I have a hankering for some more strawberry jam on biscuits. How about you join me for a stroll down to the kitchen?" With a faint smile, I nodded, and we began to walk toward the front of the library. At least we were away from my drawing. I just hoped nobody would find it while I was gone. We walked the aisle of books, stopping here and there to fix up a shelf, a habit both Grayson and I had acquired from spending so much time wandering in the library. "By the way," said Grayson, "that's a mighty nice map of the library you did. Very impressive." "What did you say?" I asked, trying to keep calm. "Your drawing on the windowsill back there. It must have taken you quite a while to figure out how this place winds around. I think you got close. At least it looked good from what little I saw." My hands were trembling now. "Are you all right, Alexa? Maybe we should pay a visit to a real doctor and make sure the hand is okay. You're shaking like a leaf." I looked up at Grayson with a big smile. "No, I'm just so excited to try those biscuits and strawberry jam I can hardly wait." I began pulling Grayson down the row of books toward the kitchen. I had to distract him, and heading in the direction of food was definitely the best way to do it. Adjust this real quick. Okay. Chapter 9. Alone in Bridwell. I wasn't ready to go searching around the library when I returned later with Grayson, so I retrieved the map and ran to my room. I stayed alone for a while and thought about what I would do next. Then I went to the kitchen for dinner. When I returned to my room, I sat on my windowsill, folded my arms around my knees, and gazed into the misty orange glow of the sunset. The evening breeze was a welcome change from the smoldering heat of the day. I had Warvold's silver key in one hand, my drawing of the etching in the Jocastas fluttering back and forth in the other. An hour later, the orange sunset had turned to black night, and I lurched out of my windowsill, crossed the room, and sat down on my bed. Turn there. I had a fitful night of sleep, fraught with dreams of Purvis Cotter's head bobbing grotesquely atop a cat's body, chasing me from room to room around the lodge. In the morning I awoke, dressed, and went to the kitchen. It was already hot, and the light breeze had completely disappeared. The sun would soak Bridwell like a furnace all morning and bring it to a staggering boil by midday. I wondered how it might feel beneath the tall trees outside the wall on the cool forest floor. Breakfast was buzzing more than usual. Grayson showed up for more strawberry preserves, this time on pancakes. Ganesh, my father, and Nicholas were in a debate over land use and expansion between Lunenburg and Ainsworth. Silas had returned from Lathbury earlier in the morning and was busy putting the finishing touches on a plate filled with toast, biscuits, and hotcakes, all covered with thick red jam. No doubt an advice from Grayson. I poked Silas in the ribs from behind and greeted him. "Back so soon? I thought you would be gone at least another day." Both he and Grayson turned in my direction. "You know those old horses of mine, they would rather ride in the dark than in the heat of the day," said Silas, and then he looked at me with a squinted eye. "If you tell him I said that, I'll glue your shoes together." "I see you've discovered the fresh strawberry jam." "Oh, whoops, that was her. I see you discovered the fresh strawberry jam," I said. "Grayson is guzzling it by the gallon. I think he's a bear dressed up as a man, getting an early start on his hibernation." Grayson, a familiar red bird circling his thick mustache, raised one eyebrow at me and put an entire pancake slathered with jam into his mouth in one bite. It was disgusting. Any word from my mother? I said, hoping the answer was no. I waited as long as I could, but she was out when I arrived. I did leave your letter and a note that I would return in a few days if she had anything for you or your father. I'm sure she'll send it along. Relieved, I drifted over to the buffet and filled a plate with food. Then I sat down next to my father. Nicholas was talking, and he was right in the middle of making a point. I tell you, if you don't pay attention to Ainsworth, they will one day rule Bridwell. We must expand Lunenburg northwest toward them before they sprawl too far. I know they seem friendly now, but I don't trust them, and neither did my father. I received a warm good morning from Father, Ganesh, and Nicholas, and then they continued on. Father with his hand on my shoulder. It felt good to have his arm around me. This kind of conversation was called fishing. Whenever Father and Ganesh were looking for options from everyday folks about issues of the day, they would float the topic out like fish bait and see which point of view caused the hook to be swallowed whole. Obviously, they had initiated Nicholas into this tactic as well, since he had thrown out the first line. I couldn't disagree more, said Ganesh, my father giving a hidden wink. If we build toward them, they'll see it as hostile and will be pulled into a confrontation. Now, I agree that we've got to expand. These last few days in Bridwell have clearly shown that. Within a few years, Bridwell and the towns against the sea will be at maximum capacity, and then what will we do? We have over 10 miles between us and Ainsworth, which I think is a good, healthy distance. We can't expand off the cliffs from Lathbury or Turlock, so those are dead ends. Bridwell is stuck in the middle with no place to grow. I think our best option is to start building 2- and 3-story buildings. Growing up instead of out. We could grow to twice our size if we just abolish the single-level rule. That's an extremely bad idea. It was Purvis, who had quietly arrived at the dining room entryway unnoticed. He was leaning against the wall, hands crossed over his chest. Why aren't you out protecting us all from the boogeyman? Said my father. It gave me the creeps when he said it, but everyone else seemed to think it was funny. Laugh all you want, but I'm telling you, building a higher is a dangerous idea. It exposes us to the outside and makes us vulnerable, said Purvis. And once people start spending all their free time looking for strange things outside the wall, you'll have an even bigger problem. Get common folk curious, and you might as well set Bridwell on a barrel of gunpowder. He was at the buffet now, loading up on eggs. I didn't like where he was taking the conversation. Take Alexa, for instance, Purvis continued. We give her the only room in Bridwell that has a window with a teensy view over the wall. She's only a child, and we assume a child is timid and afraid. What interest would a child have in the outside? But even sweet little Alexa here figured out that if she stands in the sill, she can get a little taste of what's out there. And then, what does she do? Here it came. I knew I was as good as grounded for the rest of my life. She brings a spyglass to Bridwell and pops herself up in that sill looking for who knows what. A spyglass! Those things have been banned in Bridwell for as long as I can remember. Or did you all have a change of heart and forget to tell old Purvis about it? I wish I'd skipped breakfast and gone straight to the library. I expected Father to recoil, to take his arm from around my tiny shoulder. He would have had every right. Instead, he gripped my scrawny arm tightly in his big hand and pulled me closer. He reached over with his fork and stole some eggs off my plate. Chewing them with deliberate slowness, the room was silent. Mr. Kocher, said my father, how much longer do you think Ganesh and I will be around? I'd seen my father like this before. His tone had changed ever so slightly, but it signified to everyone in the room that his claws were out. I really don't have the faintest idea, sir, said Purvis, staring him down. Father rose and stood behind me with one hand on each of my shoulders, his firm grip unwavering. Take a close look at this girl. She's becoming a young lady. In a few summers she will be a young woman. The day is coming when she will be part of the ruling council. She will have her opinions heard. She will be listened to. Unless Ganesh gets with it and has some children soon, Alexa will be running this place with Nicholas before long. She won't need me to come to her defense, and it will be her choice what rank you enjoy, or whether you remain here at all. You would do well to consider these things before opening your mouth in a crowded room again." My father sat back down and resumed eating from his plate. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Cotter?" he asked. I think Purpose and I both understood for the first time in our lives that one day I would have authority over him. He wasted no time in trying to defend himself. "But that girl is a troublemaker. Mark my words, Davy. She will put us in a dangerous situation and bring us all down. I don't know how or when, but she will endanger us." He scanned the room for support, but everyone was either looking down at his food or glaring back at him. "I will not bother her again," Purpose continued, "but not because I care about the absurdity of a future with her in charge. If I'm not here to run the guards, this place will be totally vulnerable. I've taken an oath to protect Bridwell, and putting my tail between my legs to stoop to your ego and your spoiled child is fine by me. So long as Bridwell is safe, that's all I care about." He turned on his heels and stormed out of the room. Grayson was halfway to the library before Purvis was even out of the dining area. The rest of the group started talking again and milling around. "Would you all mind if Alexa and I excused ourselves?" Father said, walking me out of the room, down the stairs and out the door. We walked for a long time, and neither of us said a thing. Eventually, the silence took its toll on me, and I gave in with a shower of words. "I've already written to Mother and told her I took the spyglass, but she hasn't responded. I know I shouldn't have taken it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just wanted a glimpse of what might be out there." "Calm down, Alexa," Father said. He took my hand, and we walked to the center of town and sat on a bench. "Warvold is gone, Alexa. I don't think anyone realizes how significant that is. Ganesh, Nicholas, and I were good leaders, but we're not Warvold. He built this place, and he had his own secret reasons for doing it. He knew a lot more about many things than he told us." Father scanned the courtyard again before continuing. "We're already feeling pressure from Ainsworth to do things we don't want to do. They're testing our resolve now that Warvold is gone. And it's no secret that Purpose is getting further out of control at a time when we need his leadership." Father leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and began picking at his fingernails. "Warvold talked about you all the time, about your obvious interest in the outside and how smart you were for your age. He saw a lot of the adventure he once was in you, and he mentioned more than once how unfortunate it was that you were locked inside the walls he built. He understood why you liked to sneak around by yourself." He paused and turned to look at me. "Did he tell you anything that night when he died?" It was an accusing question, and it startled me. "No, nothing important," I said. "He acted very strange, though. He reminisced about the past and told me a silly fable about blind men, but that was all." My father watched me carefully as I spoke, trying to see if I was telling the truth or not. He didn't ask about the key, and I didn't tell. It was too precious to give up without being asked about it directly. He sighed deeply, went back to picking his nails, and continued. "People are worried down in Turlock, and they want me and Ganesh to make a visit. We're leaving this morning, and we'll be gone for 2 days. I know it's sudden, but these are troubled times, and we're trying to keep things under control. I'll give Purpose to leave in Lunenburg while we're gone, so you won't kill each other." He paused again and looked at me, his eyes warning me not to be a nuisance while he was gone. "I've spoken to Grayson, and he will look after you. Can I count on you to stay out of trouble, at least until I get back?" I chose my reply carefully. I've already had enough trouble for one visit to Bridwell. My answer seemed to satisfy him. We stood and hugged briefly, and then he started to walk away from me toward Remy Lodge. A moment later he was gone, and I stood alone at the center of town, the walls of Bridwell towering all around me. Somehow, I felt more like a prisoner than I had before. Little drinky break. Make sure you stay hydrated, guys. It's very important. Chapter 10. Cabeza de Vaca. It was 9 in the morning when I left my room for the second time that day. I wore a leather pouch around my neck. In it, I placed the map, the key, and my pocket knife. My mother had brought me a sweater during the funeral, which I tied around my waist. I took nothing else with me, thinking even if I was lucky, I would be gone for only a few hours. When I arrived in the library, I removed the map and began searching for a starting place. It was much more difficult than I thought it would be to decipher the locations. The map showed only the winding paths, no sign of doors, walls, or windows. From my low vantage point, I could not see what the pattern looked like. It was clear only that the mountain on the map was along one of the four edges of the large room. It struck me as odd that Grayson would understand the map at a first glance as he had, but then he had been in the library day in and day out for years and years, and had walked each aisle thousands of times. I visited only a few days a year, and I was thoroughly confused. Every time I started down a twisting aisle of books that seemed to look like one on the map, it turned out to be a different path altogether. It was almost as if the map were changing as I was looking at it. I turned it every which way, started from different walls and entryways, but all my effort led me around in circles. After an hour, I wandered into Grayson's office to see if he would make a mid-morning run to the kitchen with me. He was hunkered down over a beautiful green and yellow book, using gold leaf paint to fill in some missing spots in the cover. My stomach rumbled, and he looked up from his work. "I was just thinking the same thing," he said, and we meandered down the hall together, making small talk. We were mostly quiet as we sat in the kitchen drinking cold milk and eating strawberry jam on buns, and then I removed the map and set it on the table. "See if you can guess where my favorite chair is on this map," I said, hoping for some insight that would help me find my way. I turned the map toward Grayson, and he looked at it thoughtfully. He seemed to be having as much trouble as I was at first. Then his brows went up. In his haste, he used a jammy index finger to poke where he thought my chair would be. It left a sticky red spot on an otherwise clean map. And he apologized, but I didn't mind. Grayson had just put a giant red dot by the mountain. Now that I saw it, everything shifted into place on the map. I realized where Grayson's office and the doors into the library were, along the windows and the rolling pathways of the books. It all made sense. I could tell Grayson was likely to eat a lot more food and take his time getting back to work, so it was the perfect opportunity to duck out. "Thanks for the company, Grayson," I said. "I'll catch up with you later." As I stood to go, I added, "I'm going to be busy with something for the next few days, so if you don't see me, there's nothing to worry about." Grayson nodded, and I walked out of the kitchen, which was about what I had expected. In all the years I'd been coming to Bridwell, my father had never thought to investigate what sort of chaperone Grayson was. In times past, when my father left for 1 or 2 days, he would always ask Grayson to take care of me, and Grayson was always happy to do it. Only Grayson never adjusted his behavior after the request. I'd see him in the library, or maybe I wouldn't. If I didn't cross his path for an entire day and night, Grayson thought nothing of it. After all, how far could I go? I ran back to the library and zigzagged my way through the maze of aisles. Rounding a sharp corner, I bumped my shoulder on a bookcase and nearly sent rows of books crashing to the floor. I steadied the teetering shelf and continued on. My run toned down to a brisk walk. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of my favorite old chair. A hawk sat outside the windowsill and did not stir as I came into view. Then both cats were on the chair, watching me intently. It was weird how all three remained still and alert, following my every move. I started by feeling along the wall and the sill, and then on the shelves near the chair, which were covered with books. I felt every nook and dimple carefully and pulled out a lot of old books I'd looked at before. I began to think that maybe a certain one might trigger a secret passage or reveal a hidden treasure. Before long, I had taken almost all the books out and placed them in teetering piles around me. This exercise produced a lot of dust, but nothing of any interest, although the cats did enjoy chasing each other around and darting between stacks. I put all the books back one at a time, and 10 minutes later I flopped down in my chair, tired and frustrated. I looked over my shoulder and realized that the chair was pushed up against the only wall I had not checked. a wall that was shared with the staircase on the other side. I got up and pulled on the chair, a heavy beast that clearly had not been moved for a long time. It took all my strength to slowly budge it out into the open space. With the chair out of the way, I could see an otherwise covered section of the wood wall, with its paneled dark brown accents. Just below the middle trim, dead center where the back of the chair had been, was a small green figure of a mountain. I ran my fingers over the image and felt a dimple in its center, though I could see no change in appearance. I took the silver key out of my pocket and held it in my shaking hand. I looked over my shoulder and saw the cats perched on the top edge of the chair watching me. "You two are awfully curious today," I said. Looking over them, I saw the hawk on the sill. "So is your feathered friend there at the window. Do you all know something I don't?" I said it, half expecting an answer, but I received only a blank stare from all three, along with a wimpy meow from Sam. I felt for the dimple, put the key to it, and watched as it slid into the wall. Then I turned the key and heard a light click. I removed the key and placed it back in my leather pouch, quickly looking around to make sure nobody was watching. I pushed against the wall with one hand, and a panel about 2 feet by 2 feet slid open on creaking hinges. A soft whip of cool, earthy air escaped, running over my face like a faint whisper. With the lighting pouring in from the library, I could see a ladder going down into the dark. An old oil lamp, complete with a small box of wooden matches, hung from a rusty nail on the third step of the ladder. I could see only the first 6 rungs going down, and the first few feet of planks covering the walls. After that, the whole was swallowed by a deathly still blackness. The cool air continued to work its way slowly out of the small doorway as if a frozen sleeping giant was breathing steadily through the hole. It smelled like the dusty road to Bridwell just after a heavy rain had given it a good soaking. I turned to the bookshelf on my right and browsed through the items at eye level. I chose the smallest book I could find, a little red-covered volume with white lettering on the spine. Adventures at the Border of the 10th City by someone with a strange name. Strange name I'd never heard before. I opened the book, read the first page, and was immediately captivated by the audacious subject matter. Cabeza de Vaca was an explorer who left his home in the northern kingdom during the 7th reign of Grindal. After surviving a hurricane near Mount Latham, he turned back and headed toward the Great Ravine, where he was trapped for a week in a cave by a relentless pack of wolves. When at last the wolves conceded, a hungry and tired Cabeza continued his journey into the Sly Field. Cabeza lived on what he could find and traveled among the oddities of the Sly Field, of which there were many, searching for a way through the mist and into the mythical 10th City. But each time he tried to enter the mist, it so covered everything around him and he could scarcely see his own hand in front of his face. And so each time he wandered about for days in the shroud of that place, and always he came near the same spot he'd gone in. Eventually he gave up his quest for the 10th City and went instead to Mount Norwood, where he wrote of his travels. This book is an account of Cabeza de Vaca's adventure in the Great Ravine, the Sly Field, and the mists that lie ahead of the 10th City. According to the chapter titles for the book, it would go on to talk about de Vaca's role in the government of the Northern Kingdoms, his later travels, and eventual death. I closed the book and held it in my hand. "You didn't do too badly for yourself," I said. It was common for me to talk to authors this way. Somehow it made them more real. "Your travels are about to include one flight to the bottom of a creepy black pit." I held the book out over the opening and let go, sending Cabeza de Vaca free-falling into the darkness. It took a lot longer than I had hoped it would for the book to hit the bottom. Not being a scientist, I lacked the ability to calculate the time, speed, and distance, but my best guess put the bottom of the hole in the neighborhood of 30 terrifying feet. It was hard to imagine what I would encounter at the bottom. Maybe there actually was a sleeping giant waiting for a tasty young lady to warm his belly. I turned and looked back at the library. The hawk remained, but the cats were nowhere to be seen. I stood up and tried to scare the bird off, flashing my arms out and banging my feet on the floor. But the hawk sat silent and still, eyes fixated on my every move. I crouched down, reached into the darkness, and took the lamp from the nail. The glass that protected the wick was jammed, and I had to force it off. I wet the wick with oil from the basin, then broke 2 matches before successfully striking the third. My lighting problem solved, I turned back to the passageway. The eerie dark breeze remained. It made my lamp flicker and sent faint shadows across the walls. I hung my feet over the edge and swung them out onto the ladder. Then I slithered through the hole and caught hold of the top rung with my left hand. I took the lamp in my other hand and hung it by the old rusty nail. There was only one thing left to do. Seal myself in so no one would know where I had gone. I reached back into the library and grabbed the leg of the chair. Then I moved it in little spurts as I lunged back again and again on the ladder. With the chair in place, I swung the secret door shut from the inside and it clicked into position. The locking mechanism was simple to use from the inside, but I clicked it in and out several times to be sure. I took the lamp and hung it down low as low as I could, rehanging it on the 5th rung. I stepped down the ladder and repeated this process until I was standing on the dirt floor 28 rungs underground. Looking up was much like looking down had been, the light evaporating into a starless black sky after only a few feet. There were walls on 3 sides and a tunnel heading west under the library in the direction of the mountains. The book I had dropped lay on the ground. Cabeza de Vaca had landed badly, and it appeared I now had 2 items in my possession that would require Grayson's attention. I was destroying books at an alarming pace. One last look up, and then I started walking westward under the city. The walls were made of wood planks with earth peeking through the cracks. The floor was packed dirt. I passed old footprints, which set my heart racing and even made me briefly turn back for home. I told myself over and over that I was the only one in the tunnel, and eventually I began walking toward the mountains again. The tunnel did not change in height or width as I walked on, but my trek went uphill at an unexpectedly steep grade. After 30 minutes, about the time it takes to walk from one side of Bridwell to the other at a steady pace, the tunnel began to turn slightly to the right. Then it straightened out, and I walked at least as far again. After a while, I reached the end, a wall jutting straight up in front of me, another ladder hanging down, a familiar hollow blackness dripping on me from above. I was afraid to climb, and I imagined the sharp teeth of the giant closing on me if I went up into his gaping mouth. I was sweaty and tired, and I sat down in the dirt at the base of the ladder to rest before going up. "Hey, Cabeza, how you doing?" I said to the book in my hand. I wiped my brow against my shirt and looked back down the tunnel toward home. "Were there times you got scared and thought you might not make it?" "I bet there were. I bet you had those kinds of thoughts all the time." "I think I'll have to leave you here for now, since you really provided no use for the rest of my journey, which will probably end at the tongue of a giant at the top of this ladder. You wait for me here, and if I make it back, I promise I'll read all about you." I had to give him points for listening. He was an obedient adventurer, if not a very talkative one. I stood up, faced the ladder, and began my climb. 28 rungs later, I bumped my head on boards at the top, and pushed with all my might to budge them out of the way. With no warning at all, the whole top flew up in the air, blinding me with an intense light that made me close my stinging eyes. Bits of dirt fell down onto my face and head. I nearly lost my grip and almost fell back into the hole. The lamp dangled precariously off the top rung as I went out. It was quiet except for noises I had only heard from a distance before. A breeze dancing through the trees, birds singing, bushes rustling all around me. I was terrified to emerge from my crouch on the ladder and looked over the edge where the top had been blown off. Again, I contemplated turning back and running down the tunnel. I decided I would take a peek. And if it was scary, I would hustle down the ladder as fast as my feet could carry me. I slowly moved up and peered over the edge. To my great surprise, the hawk was sitting on a large stone a few feet away, just looking as it had when I left the library. Well now, you are a small one, aren't you? I turned quickly in the direction of the voice behind me. Balancing open the trap door was the smallest man I'd ever seen. He could not have stood more than 2 feet tall. They were right about that much. You're a little bugger, definitely small enough, the man said. The trapdoor wobbled back and forth with the push of a light breeze and the overcorrecting pull from the man. If it came crashing down, it would smack my head and send me falling like a rock to the dirt floor. I'll be needing you to come out of there right quick, the small man continued. I can't hold this door much longer. He gave a nod to the hawk, and it was gone in a flash of feathers and screeching. Darius will be pleased I found you. With some luck, we'll be in the forest by mid-morning tomorrow, as he had hoped. I was out of the hole and on my feet, confused and not sure what I should do next. The small man pushed the door down, and it slammed hard against the ground. It was covered with moss and had a long, thin rope made of braided tree bark attached to the top edge. We can't stay out here in the open. Must be moving along. We have a ways to go, and hard climbing it is, said the little man, leaving me behind as he walked at a brisk pace away from me into the mountains. He glanced back with a scolding look on his face. Well, come on, Lexa. Wait, who are you? How do you know my name? Come back! But the small man just kept on walking, and so I followed, racing to catch up. He yelled to me, continuing on, not looking back. My name is Zipes. I live in the mountains. I'm here to take you to your appointed destination. We were in a closed triangle now, with the wall from Bridwell to Lathbury on one side, the wall from Bridwell to Turlock on another, and the wide, lonely sea on the last. Mount Norwood stood prominently before me, filling much of the space between the walls and the sea. I looked back over my shoulder and saw the walls getting smaller and smaller in the distance. I was surprised at how insignificant they looked, cowering at the foot of the mountains. Beyond the walls, dark hills rolled on and on, into ominous and forbidding valleys unseen from Bridwell itself. I turned to the mountains and began walking again. The higher I went, the higher they seemed to go, even farther and brighter in the sunlight, ever expanding to places I could never fully discover. I stopped and turned to look upon Bridwell again, and I saw it as I had never seen it before. It sat squarely between darkness and light, its roads at a 3-headed snake bound at the center with a hideous head, dividing vast lands. It had a certain balance, a symmetry, as if each land were pushing against the walls, trying to bring them down, to dominate and to rule. As I began walking again, following the little man, I felt a profound sense of exhilaration and fear. Sense of exhilaration and fear. Dun dun dun. Sense of exhilaration and fear. Dun dun dun. Okay. Sense of exhilaration and Alright, so that got us to chapter 11. It's been about an hour. But I don't mind continuing on. I just have some laundry I need to move over. And stuff like that. So, what we're going to do is we are going to take a short little break. And we will come back and see what Yipes has in store for us in the mountains. Break time! Wait, what is my stuff? I don't remember my stuff. Oh wait, I forgot. Wait, what is my stuff? Okay, be right back. And take this time to use the bathroom, drink some water, get some food, be healthy and all that. Drink some water, get some food, be healthy and all that. Drink some water, get some food, be healthy and all that. Drink And we are back. Everyone get a little break, get some snackies. And we are back. Everyone get a little break, get some snackies. And we are some waters, all that fun jazz. All the nourishing things that someone needs. I just realized that the delay between my recording software and on Twitch is like 5-7 seconds delayed. Oh well, whatever. Okay, so we're gonna go about another hour or 3 more chapters. Whichever comes first, because I did... No, did I do 3? Hold on, I can't count. I read 8, I did 9, I did 3 chapters. So, we're gonna try and read through chapters 11, 12, and 13, and stop on 14, and probably call it a day for this session. So, that'll get us through a good chunk of the book. Let's see, I'm curious. 7:14. Will get us to about the halfway point of the book, which is actually pretty good. Alrighty. Go ahead and pop on those listening ears and let's get back to reading. Chapter 11. The Glowing Pool. Let's get back to reading. Yipes was a fast walker for such a small man, and keeping pace with him was hard work. My feet were blistering and my shoulders and cheeks were burned and tender to the touch. Sweat dripped down my nose and stung to my eyes. I kept looking back as we climbed higher into the mountains, the walls diminishing into lifeless, stringy worms in the distance. Yipes was not the talkative sort, or at least he was quiet during our trek. At first I asked him questions, but his lack of response and my exhaustion eventually wore me down, and we worked our way up the mountain in the heat of the day, in relative silence. Now and then we would pass under a grouping of trees where the shade felt cool and leaves rustled high in the branches beyond my view. Watching Yipes scamper in front of me like a rabbit, it struck me that I was following a small, strange man into the wild. I might never return to my home, never see my parents or friends again, and never wander the rows of the books in the Bridwell Library. Even so, the reality of being outside the wall and the rush of the adventure were feelings that somehow comforted me. I felt as if I was doing what I was meant to do, and I knew no regret. I don't know how long I was lost in my thoughts, but suddenly I nearly stumbled right over Yipes, who had stopped and turned in my direction. If not for his cry of, "Whoa, young lady!" I might have put my knee right into his plump little nose. I crouched down to get a better look at him and take advantage of a rare chance to confront my guide face to face. He had dark eyes, a dainty mustache, and slight lips before a row of yellowy teeth. His skin was dark and leathery, toasty brown, as though he'd been taking heat from the sun in large doses for quite some time. He wore a tan-colored hat, overflowing brown hair, leather shorts, a simple top, and leather sandals. "Thank you for stopping. I thought you might go on all day. You're quite the climber, aren't you?" I said. Chin high, chest out, Yipes answered me with a comic high voice. "I'm not allowed to talk to you just now. Sorry, so sorry. I wish I could. Strict orders from Darius." And then, looking all around him and leaning close to my face, he said, "Thank you for the compliment." He seemed completely harmless, casually standing in the middle of the path, a slight grin on his face. "Can you tell me where we're going, or who Darius is? We've been climbing for an awfully long time, and I have no idea where you're taking me, I said. He was back at attention now, stiff and serious. Sorry, strictest orders. I must take you to the appointed destination as quickly as possible. Important meeting tomorrow, very important He stopped short, turned his cantaloupe-sized head to the left, and listened intently. In a flash, he was through the bushes and scaling a nearby tree like a spooked squirrel. Seconds later, he was so high in the branches of the tree I lost sight of him. I looked back down the mountain and saw the thin, endless snakes of the walls far below. I imagined I could flick them with my finger and knock them all down. When I turned back to the trail, Yipes was standing at attention, not winded in the slightest, with the same calm manner as before. So sorry. I thought I heard something in the bushes. Can't be too careful now, can we? Important cargo. Yes, very important cargo. He led me to a stream where we drank. I began gulping, and Yipes told me to drink only a little or I might become ill and weak. He gave me dried meat from his pouch and told me to sit and rest. Another sip of the icy water and a few minutes more rest, then we were off again. Not far now, not far at all, said Yipes as we meandered farther up the mountain, our pace much faster than it had been. The trees grew thick, but the heat remained stifling as we approached the mid-afternoon. The minutes turned into another hour of treading time behind my stalwart companion. My feet ached with open blisters and my legs burned with every step, but I was determined to keep going without complaint. The stream we had rested at earlier now ran alongside us as we walked its bank. Only a few feet wide, with a bright green underbelly, it offered the refreshing sound of water flowing over rocks. I saw flashes here and there in its depth, fish moving and reflecting as they sensed our presence along the edge. I was so tired I thought I might pass out, and again I lost track of Yipes in my delirious wondering. Excuse me, you can stop now, said Yipes. He was sitting on a large rock a few feet behind me, lacing his leather sandal, which had come undone. He looked annoyingly refreshed, as if the massive trek we had just made was nothing more than a sightseeing stroll. I'm afraid this is as far as I can take you. The rest you have to do on your own, said Yipes, now lapping up water from the stream, which had shrunk to only a couple of feet across. I hobbled over the stream, now quiet in its slow movement, and I drank in large gulps until I thought I would burst. Then I sat at the water's edge and felt it all coming back up again. Hunching over, soupy water poured out of my mouth. I fought off a sickly shiver, rinsed my mouth in the stream, and turned to face Yipes. Exhausted, I lurched forward and fell on my face. Why am I out here in the dark? Something warm is beside me. Warbled, his mouth gaping, rotting teeth dripping yellow goo down his chin. He's grabbing me by the shoulder, shaking me hard. Run, Alexa, run! Get away! Wake up, Alexa, wake up now! You must get on with it! Yipes was gently nudging my shoulder with his clam-sized hand. It was late afternoon, maybe 4 o'clock. I must have slept for at least an hour. I stretched, let out a painful sigh, pulled my knees to my chest, and sat breathing heavy sobs, tears rolling down my kneecaps, running a wet track to the top of my feet. My body ached all over, and my mind continued to struggle with the surroundings. I had an unfortunate dull throb in my head. It felt like a man, one even smaller than Yipes, was standing behind my eyeballs with a club, swinging with all his might to bang his way out. Bang! 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 Sorry, Mr. Yipes, sir, she won't budge. Put your back into it, man. Give it all you've got. Bang! 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 Alexa, stop that now. Pounding your head against your knees won't make you feel any better. On that, you can trust me, Yipes insisted. Come on, then. On your feet. He was in the stream now, splashing me with icy cold water. I jerked awake, jumping to a stand, and felt the shearing pain in my legs and feet. The open blisters were screaming back at me to sit down. Sit down, or I'll send the club through your forehead. I fell to my knees. Yipes continued the chilling barrage of splashes until I finally screamed, Enough! I'm up! Just give me a second, I'll be ready to start walking again. He stopped splashing and watched me as I wrung my hair out with my hands. Then he emerged from the stream and returned to his perch on the rock. I was back on my feet, gaining more confidence that I might have the strength to hobble my weary bones a few more steps into the mountains. I think I'm ready for another hour or two, I said. You're going to have to slow down, though. I've got some remarkable blisters. Jake smiled and sat with his elbows on his knees, hands folded. He told me in a soft, slow voice, Young lady, as I told you before, we've arrived. You're an impressive climber. For a child, and such a small one at that, you did very well. Now, he continued, it is my duty and my privilege to point you in the direction of your destiny. My work is done for now. I've brought you this far, but the next bit of effort is all yours, I'm afraid. What I need you to do is walk up this stream. Get right in the water and walk until you reach a pool. You'll know it when you see it. Trust me on that one. This is a special place. You get only one chance to go there in all your life. I cannot tell you what to do when you get there. That you must figure out on your own. I looked up the stream with its bright green bed. It disappeared from view around a corner into the trees 100 feet away. But how will I know when I've arrived at the right spot? I turned to look at Yipes and found the rock bare. I removed my sandals and held them in my hand, dangling them from the straps with my fingers. My feet ached more than ever on the hot, sandy dirt at the edge of the stream, so I immediately staggered into the water. The stream was only a few feet wide, and it came to my knees in the middle. It felt cold on my bare legs. My feet felt the heavenly touch of the soft, furry bottom. It was like walking on a perfect feathery pillow, only better because the mossy green came up between my toes and surrounded my feet with a delicate, squishy wrapper. I let out a thankful and an unexpected smile sprouted on my face. In the heat of the day, I dunked my head and body the rest of the way in and exploded out in the stream, refreshed and walking, enjoying the velvet whisper of every step on my swollen feet. The stream narrowed further as I rounded the corner, but it remained a foot deep. The water moved slowly and quietly. As I walked further and rounded yet another corner, I saw a pool surrounded by rock walls on all sides, except for the direction I was coming from. This was the place. I reached the edge of the pool, which was about 10 feet across on all sides. I looked down and found that the water had turned to a murky brown around my legs. Behind me, where I had been walking, an inky darkness inhabited the stream like a plague of locusts in a summer sky. The pool itself glowed in a strange hue I had never seen before. I moved to its center in 3 quick strides, and for a brief moment I could see the bottom. The water now at my chest. I saw the shimmering outline of a stone bursting with lavish green color. A moment later, my disturbance in the pool brought up the muddy brown thickness around my legs, settling around my chest and leaving me almost chin-deep in dirty water. I dove down, grabbed a handful of rocks, and brought them up in the air. They were all brown and bland, entirely void of bright color. Had I been dreaming? I dove down again and again all over the pool until I was exhausted and angry, standing in a dark pool of icky gunk. I slapped my arms against the water with a loud pop and let out a grunt of frustration. I don't understand! What am I supposed to do here? I yelled, hoping to see Yipes climb down the rock wall with an answer. But I was utterly alone. As I stood motionless in the water, the blackness turned a shade lighter. Maybe if I could stay completely still, the dirt would settle down enough so that I could see the glowing emerald rock clearly again. Then I reached down ever so slowly. Maybe I could pick out the right rock, and it would be glowing green in my hand. While it may not be the end of the test, it seemed like a good place to start, and so I stood, still as a statue in the pool of murky water, patiently waiting. It took a lot longer than I thought it might for the water to change. It stayed just the same for an excruciatingly long time. Was it a lighter shade of brown? Could I see the outline of shapes at the bottom of the pool? I couldn't be sure, and I continued to wait and wait. It felt an awful lot like when I stood on the sill in my room for hours on end looking out the window for a sign of life in the dark hills. I wondered how Father and Ganesh were doing. I missed them terribly. 1,000 other random thoughts filled my head as I tried my best to stay perfectly motionless. The water was definitely getting lighter now. Unfortunately, the day was getting darker almost as fast. The water had been exhilarating at first, but I was starting to shiver as the heat of the day began to wane. Surely my feet were prunes by now, and worse, my arches were precariously close to cramping, which would cause me to move and stir up the water all over again. Night was coming, and with it a cruel coldness that would force me out of the pool. I closed my eyes and concentrated hard. I imagined I was sitting next to Father, he with his pipe billowing sweet smoke around the room. The fire was a raging monster stacked high with crackling wood, sending an orange simmer across the faces in the room. Ganesh, Grayson, Silas Hardy, Nicholas, and my father all ranting in their usual way. That rancid tobacco is about as welcome as a skunk at a dinner party. You think the sun comes up just to hear you crow, all the nonsense that made the evening flow like thick honey into the wee hours. I opened my eyes and looked up. It was night in the sky, stars sparkling in clusters across my line of sight. And yet it was not as dark as the dark of an unlit night ought to be. The way the streets of Bridwell were after the lamps were extinguished and all was black but for the dim lamplight at the towers. The three rock walls shimmered unnaturally, like the pages of a book under flitting candlelight. I gazed along the wall and down into the water below me. The pool was aglow with a radiant green light, pulsing from a single thumb-sized rock a few inches from my big toe. My feet and legs reflected the fuzzy line flame, which worked its diminishing magic to the edges of the pool in a soft, smoldering finish. My shivering was rabid now, goaded on by the dreaded thought of reaching down into the water, submerging my head, neck, and shoulders in the icy glow. The more I shivered, the weaker the glow became, and I could see that if I waited much longer, the dirt would rise again and put out the light from the stone entirely. I slowly descended to my neck, yelping in slow bursts as the sting of cold took my breath away. Then I gulped a big breath of air, held it against my will, and plunged all the way under. I could see the stone clearly now, surrounded by other stones that remained brown and black and lifeless. It was just the one by my big toe, that shone like a tiny green sun in a liquid sky. I reached down slowly and grasped its warm surface in my hand, then rose, blasting out of the water, my body frozen in the night air. "Well done, little lady!" It was the unmistakable, high-pitched voice of Yipes. "Come on out there now! I don't want you catching a cold!" I was smiling through my chattering teeth, delighted at the sight of my little friend hanging by the stone wall a few feet above me like a monkey on a tree trunk. He climbed around the wall and down to the stream's edge a few feet away, motioning me repeatedly with his arm. "I'm frozen, Yipes!" I hobbled as best as I could out of the pool and onto the mossy edge of the stream. I was greeted with a warm blanket, which I eagerly wrapped around my shoulders as I sat on the soft, dry bank. Out of the confines of the pool, we were drenched in a welcome bath of moonlight. "Where are your shoes?" Yipes asked as he placed the leather string around my neck with a pouch at the end. I cursed, surprising Yipes and myself with the outburst. "I must have dropped them in the pool. I had them in my hand when I went in, but I've lost them now." No worries. Put the gem in the pouch around your neck. I'll be right back." Before I could protest, he was gone, head first into the water and out of sight. Then, with a whoosh, he was out of the water at the center of the pool, holding my sandals over his head. "These yours?" he asked with a grin on his face, water dripping down his mustache. He swam back and held my sandals out to me, but I was busy turning the stone in my hands. It maintained a radiant glow. It was smooth, about half the size of a chicken egg, and heavier than it ought to have been for its size. The color was astonishing, a tasty lime cream that made me want to smell it, expecting a tart zing in my nostrils. "Still holding that thing?" said Yipes. "You really should put it in the pouch for safekeeping. That's one stone you don't want to lose." And so I did, pulling the drawstring tightly shut after dropping it into its new home, a dry, coarse chamber of very different from its previous watery environment. I found myself strangely concerned for its well-being. The thing is to keep moving now. I know your feet are hurting you, but the worst is over. Just a little bit farther and you can take a break, said Yipes, wet from head to toe, but standing at attention without a sign of discomfort. I was up without complaint and ready to go. Yipes was starting to grow on me, and I was happy to follow his orders if he wouldn't leave me behind. We walked away from the stream into the silence of the night, the moon lighting our way, running large somewhere off in the distance hollow of the evening. Chapter 12. Darius. After Yipes and I had walked for half an hour, I heard the sound of fast-moving water. We approached the stream, which was about 20 feet wide. Along its sides and through its middle, it held fat, formless boulders like freckles on the descending arm of a giant mountain creature. On the other side of the stream, the moon shone down on an odd little house, leaning precariously on stilts, half over the water and half on land. It was small and jutted 3 miniature stories into the night sky. Puffs of smoke rose from its chimney. Yipes hopped a path of boulders across the stream, and I followed dutifully to the other side, half enjoying the challenge and half scared I might feel the cold sting of a misplaced footing. He was across and awaiting my arrival before I reached the third of 12 boulders. "You're a decent hopper," he said as I jumped down from my last rock. "And you followed my path exactly. That's good, very good. A talent such as that will come in handy." He turned and walked up the path toward the odd 3-story house. I followed him, curious what the inside would look like. The nearby stream persisted with its pleasant, crisp sound. We came to the front porch and Yipes stopped. Perched on the ledge of the porch rail was the hawk. Yipes gave it a soft scratch on the neck. "This is my house, Alexa. I'll accommodate you as best as I can until morning. Then Darius will be here to take you to the meeting," he said as he opened the door, which stood about 3 feet tall and a foot and a half wide. I had to enter on my knees with my shoulders turned sideways, but I only stood 4.5 feet tall myself, so it wasn't as small as I thought it might be. I imagined Grayson trying to get in, sucking his gut tight, mercilessly wedged like a cork with his plump belly against the door jambs. Or Purvis Concher crouched inside the front room and turning his behind into the fireplace, banging his head against the low rafters as he whooped and howled. Once inside, I took the room to be on the order of 12 feet side to side, 4 feet from the floor to ceiling. It was cozy and warm, even though I had to remain seated to avoid hitting my head. There was a table at the center of the room, which was filled with bread, nuts, fruit, and fresh water. I hadn't thought of food all day, but seeing the spread in front of me made my stomach quake with hunger. "Yipes, can I—" "No need to ask. You're my honored guest. The food is for you, of course." He licked his lips and brushed his mustache with his hand. "I refuse to eat unless you join me in the feast," I said. "Well, I suppose if you insist," he said, pulling a wonderful little nutcracker out of his pocket and advancing on the table. A broad smile covered his face, hiding his mouth almost entirely with the delicate buzz from his mustache. I reclined on my elbow, and he sat at the table on a rickety wooden chair. We ate our fill while the warm glow of the fire danced on the walls. A spiral staircase wound up to the second floor, but it was clear I would have difficulty making the climb. By the looks of it, there was a reasonable chance of altogether lodging myself in the passageway, so I decided not to ask if I could see the rest of this fine little home. Instead, I probed him with questions. "You're sworn to secrecy. Not a word out of you about this man Darius, or the mysterious meeting I'm to attend?" I asked, already well into a large, juicy apple. "Soon enough you'll know everything. Soon enough indeed." "Can you tell me why you live in the mountain and where you came from?" I asked. He puzzled a while, fiddling with his nutcracker, then cleaned out a walnut shell. Nibbling its contents, he offered, "I can't tell you much. Not allowed, I'm afraid. I did live in Bridwell for a time, a long while ago. When my parents realized I was never going to grow to a normal size, they left me on the streets." He paused, then added, "You can disappear easily when nobody notices you to begin with." Then crack, he was busy on another walnut. "I'm small and I can't disappear easily at all," I said. "Well now, that's because you're special. You're small, but very special indeed." I think we talked a while longer, but the heat of the room and my full stomach made me so tired. I really can't remember how I got on the floor or when I began sleeping. I only remember waking up the room in the eerie glow of the morning, crisp and cool. I was crumpled up on the floor like a baby, with a blanket over my body. A quilted pillow nestled my head. I was half asleep, half awake. "She's bigger than I thought she would be." "Well, she's just fine, even I can see that." All right. No need to get excited. She'll do just fine, I agree. You've done a wonderful job getting her this far. She did it all by herself. No help needed from the likes of me. She's the one you want. She's the one. The voices became clear as I sat up. For a timeless moment, I thought I was in my room at Rennie Lodge, and everything I had experienced the previous day had merely been a dream. Then I turned and saw a full-grown wolf standing next to Yipes, razor-sharp white teeth an inch long in its panting mouth. I jolted back against the wall and felt a familiar cold fear digging into my bones. I rubbed my eyes to make sure I was awake and found with unfortunate clarity that I was indeed alert and fully conscious. I began to feel a strange awareness all around me. It felt as though I somehow understood what the trees were saying as the wind blew through the branches outside and what the water rolling over the rocks in the stream meant to express. "Allow me to introduce myself," said the wolf. "I am Darius." His lips did not move to speak like a human, but I comprehended him entirely. The way he moved from side to side, his paws shuffling on the floor, the tilt of his head, the subtle noises from his throat, and 100 other things combined to form a language I understood with perfect accuracy. What was happening to me? "I'm sorry, did I just hear you introduce yourself?" I gasped. "Yes, you did. And I understand you are Alexa Daly of Bridwell Common. I am ever so pleased to make your acquaintance." "Likewise," I said in a flat, quiet tone. Yipes said nothing and remained stiff at attention against the far wall. The wolf advanced in liquid strides and stopped a few feet in front of me. "I know you're confused and in need of answers. I also know that you have only today and tomorrow before you must return to Bridwell. I know about your father, Grayson, Ganesh, and Purvis Kocher. I know about your mother, about Nicholas, about Warvold, and a great many other things you don't know about. You have been chosen for a special purpose, Alexa. The birth of Warvold set in motion events that his death must now bring to a close. He chose you to accomplish his task, and so you must. Yipes has been kind enough to bring you this far. Now it is my duty to escort you to a meeting with the forest ruler and his council. I can take you as far as the tunnel, where you will continue your journey with Malcolm. He will take you the rest of the way." Forest ruler, council, more tunnels. My head swam with facts I could not begin to comprehend. Naturally, my first instinct was to back out of any false sense of duty I might have stumbled onto. "But I'm a child, a small child," I protested. "I can get my father. He'll believe me. You can talk to him about whatever you need." "Alexa," it was Yipes, whispering from across the room. I could barely hear him utter my name. He continued in a soft voice. "Your size is your strength. Without it, you could not have been chosen. Look at me. I am half your size. And yet without me, you would still be bumping your head against the tunnel door, locked away inside Bridwell. The size of your body is just right, Alexa. The only question is whether you're big enough inside." Then Darius added, "By nightfall, I promise, everything will be clear, and I'll have you on your way home by morning." I looked at Yipes and longed to sit with him and chat the day away. He was standing at perfect attention, letting a tear run down his cheek without wiping it away. "All right, I'll go," I said, and I understood the broad, sweet smile of the wild wolf. It was clear that Darius was in a rush to get things moving along, for just as soon as I agreed to the meeting, he was next to me, nudging me toward the door with his powerful head. "Will I see you again?" I asked Yipes as we made our way out the door and off the porch. He was hanging a satchel packed with dried food around my neck. "I think so," he said, tears welling up again in his eyes. "Darius will take good care of you. You can trust him." Then he turned away from me to tend to his hawk, embarrassed. I ran back and picked him up like a big stuffed doll and hugged him. Then I spun him in a circle and set him back down on his porch. Without another look back, I began walking with Darius, the sound of the stream farther and farther away until it was lost in the rustle of the trees overhead. As we walked, I began to think, had Warvold really chose me as Darius had said? Yes, he asked me to go on his last walk with him, but it wasn't just that. He could have given me the key, but instead he gave me one last test. I had to find it. When I did, I would make myself worthy of the choice. Chapter 13. The Terrible Secret. I had the distinct feeling we were going the wrong way. I knew the general location of the wall and the three-gated roads, and I was sure we were headed toward the Lathbury Road, which was opposite from where we should have been going. The road to Lathbury split the mountains from the dark hills, not Mount Norwood from Fennec Forest. "Darius?" I said. "Yes, Alexa. What is it?" "I haven't as keen a sense of direction as you must have, but it seems to me we're heading in the wrong direction." "Very good, Alexa. You are correct. We're making a slight detour before the meeting. Something I need you to see that won't take but a moment." Darius was friendly enough, but he had not mentioned this unscheduled diversion when we were with Yipes. It made me suspicious and edgy. Besides, he was a wolf, and I was as lost and helpless as a sheep. I would keep my guard up, and if things continued to go wrong, I would cut off the trail and go back to find Yipes. Darius was a big wolf, not at all like the small ones I'd seen in books. On all fours, he reached my shoulders, and his head was the size of the ripe watermelons in my mother's garden. His thick salt and pepper coat looked soft and full, though I had not the occasion to touch it. Placed against my hand, his massive paws would surely run the full distance of my fingers and thumb. His powerful jaws looked as though they could cut through a wagon wheel. "Here we are," he said. "Where is here?" I asked, apprehensive about what the answer would be. Then I looked past Darius and realized we were standing in a thicket with only 20 yards between the Lathbury Road and us. "How far to the right is the Lathbury Gate?" I questioned. "Not far, about 200 yards. But we're safely tucked away where the guards cannot see us. And besides, we've got hawks doing double duty this morning. They will let us know if danger is anywhere nearby." "Why have you brought me here, Darius? To test me? To see if I'll run to the tower and tell everyone that animals can talk and that this place is really haunted?" "Goodness me, no. They would think you were crazy. Besides, they can't understand us. Only you can," he said. Darius let that information sink in, then continued. "There was a tunnel carved a long while ago that goes under this wall. It's small, almost too small for me to fit, and anyway, I can't stand tunnels. I refuse to go in them, no matter the size. This tunnel is about 100 yards long, and it goes gradually deeper into the ground. At the end is a row of wood planks, and on the other side of the wood planks is packed dirt, though I'm told there is a spot where you can see through if you look just right. Badgers built the tunnel, and Yipes constructed the planks and packed dirt at the end. He's smaller than you and spent a lot of time down there working. You must crawl down to the end before I take you to Malcolm. It's the other thing you must do." Darius stepped aside, and indeed there was a small hole about 2 feet around staring up at me. "I'm not sure I can fit in that hole," I said, even though I was nearly positive I could. Darius walked a few paces until he was standing in the shade at the base of a large tree. He lay down and closed his eyes, his large head resting on soft front paws. "You can help us because you are small, Alexa. I think you'll fit." Then he became quiet, breathing steadily as though he had fallen asleep. I peered down into the hole, and I was unhappy to find it going darker rather quickly. Was I expected to climb down into a dark hole and stumble into a den of batters, thrashing and clawing until they tore me to shreds in a silent underground grave? Darius could be plotting to have me killed for any number of reasons. I barely knew him, and he was the only wolf I knew. Could I trust a wolf? I looked over at Darius, who appeared to be perfectly content to nap the morning away in the shade of the trees. It was true I could run straight for the tower, screaming and yelling and throwing my arms around. Or I might be able to find my way back to the secret tunnel leading to the library. That was a bit more of a stretch, since I really had no idea where it was. With Darius sleeping, I could probably sneak away and get Yipes to help me. But then, how much did I really know about Yipes? Not much more than I knew about Darius. I paced back and forth in front of the hole, unsure of what to do. "You are right for other reasons as well." It was Darius, his head up and alert now, his piercing dark eyes staring at me. "We have been watching you with interest for quite some time. You plot and scheme in search of a way outside the wall. You have always known that there was a higher purpose for your life, some mysterious duty, maybe even a mysterious past you can't remember. Your searching has not been as aimless as you might think. It's brought you this far, hasn't it?" Darius rose and took 4 powerful strides toward me. I imagined he could stand his own against any man or beast I knew of. "Do you know where the rock in the pool came from, and why it allows you to understand what I'm saying? Have you any idea what happened to Rennie Warvold, who Elyon is, and where he can be found? I think the answer to those questions and many more would surprise you. But first things first, you won't understand why you are here until you go down that dark hole and see for yourself. Your adventure begins or ends here, Alexa." I hesitated for a moment longer, taking in a big breath of the fresh mountain air and looking up into the light blue of the sky morning. Leaves danced in the wind, a hawk circled overhead. I wondered if Yipes had sent it to watch over me. I got down on all fours and poked my head into the hole, knowing already that I would soon find myself deep under the earth. I was unable to resist the temptation of discovery that Darius had so aptly placed in front of me. My hands were next. Touching the cool floor sent a rush of dirt rolling down into the shadows. Once my shoulders were in, I could not turn back to look behind me without knocking loose dirt off the walls. It was claustrophobic, much smaller than it had looked. My body blocked what little of the sun's rays had been streaming into the hole, and only a few shards of light poorly illuminated the space in front of me. With my knees inside, I encountered an additional discomfort. The hunch of my back bumped against the top of the tunnel as I waddled from side to side. I get my front half down by bending my elbows, but my rear end was a protrusion that was hard to control in the tight underground space. Keeping it down required me to bend back on my ankles and move forward in short, awkward shuffles. When I was all the way in and only a few feet down the hole, a cold, dry darkness surrounded me. How far did Darius say it was? 100 feet? 100 yards? I could not remember, but whatever the distance, I was sure it would seem like 100 miles. The farther I shuffled in, the darker it became. After a while, I closed my eyes to keep the dirt from stinging them. Within 20 minutes, my back and knees began to ache, and a horrible fear gripped me. I opened my eyes and had the strange effect of a dream from which I could not wake. Blackness turned to blackness as I opened and shut my eyes, and a dark terror welled up in my throat. It occurred to me at that moment that I could not turn around, would not, in fact, be able to turn around when it came time to retreat out of the tunnel. Shuffling forward was hard enough, but backward would be impossible. I would die underground, exhausted and bawling in the end, probably wedged sideways in an ill-fated attempt to turn around. I began to hyperventilate and see a rainbow of colored stars in the darkness. Another moment and I was sure I would pass out with my face in the dirt. I leaned back on my ankles and tried to calm down. 20 minutes in. Why hadn't I counted each of my shuffles forward? If each of my advances was a foot in length, then I was moving at a rate of 20 feet per minute, which would put me 400 feet into the tunnel. That would mean Darius was lying, since I had already gone at least 100 yards. He'd probably already covered the entryway with dirt and wandered off into the woods, looking for a hapless victim to devour for lunch. I lay down on my belly against the cold black dirt of my tomb, unsure of what to do next. I knew I could not turn around or go backward all the way out. I reasoned that the only choices I had were to keep going forward, or lie where I was and starve to death. 3 shuffles into my decision to go on, my hand encountered air where it should have found floor. I lowered onto my belly again and tried to reach down and feel the bottom with both arms dangling, but it was too far down to touch. The walls to the sides were also gone, and I perceived a faint light creeping into the space. I took a pebble and dropped it over the edge and heard it pop at the bottom a few feet below. I slithered down into the new open space like a dry snake, then stood. Maybe Darius had only been bad at the distance, not bad altogether. I felt around the walls and found open air all around me for several paces. Then I reached a wall that was clearly made of wood planks, and I felt along its surface to the ceiling a foot above my head. The faint glow I had discerned earlier was not enough to illuminate the darkness, but the sliver of light it created was clear against the grain of the wood. A small opening, no more than an inch, allowed in a weak beam of dusty light. I stood with my back against one of the walls and stared at the sliver of light. As I approached the wall and placed one eye over the opening, I could not imagine what I might see on the other side. It was my room. A lamp hung on the far wall and another to my right, from which I could see only light glittering here and there. A table and 2 chairs, a map on the facing wall with locations I had never seen, winding in a yarn of twists and turns of brown and black. It was a dimly lit room with earth walls, and I could not see a door. I heard voices, distant echoes at first, like sounds from the meeting room at Rennie Lodge when I tried to listen from outside closed doors. I had that same heart-racing fear as the voices came closer. It was 2 men arguing about something. As they approached, their words became clearer, in a muffled language I knew well. "I don't care about what he says. We've waited far too long already," said the first man impatiently. "I know you want to go. A lot of us do. What do you want me to do about it?" "He'll go when he's good and ready to go," said the other man. They were in the room, now to my left, out of my direct sight, but close. "Why can't we tell him we need to get on with it?" The first man angrily replied. "Our time has come. The men are waiting." They passed in front of me, and I jerked away from the hole with a yelp, falling back with a dull, earthy thud. I was afraid they might have heard me, and I cringed at the thought of seeing another eye staring back at me through the hole, the boards flying in great splinters as these men broke through and discovered my hiding place. Soft light was still finding its way through the tiny opening, and the voices moved a little farther away. When I was sure they hadn't heard me, I silently positioned my eye to the hole and saw that they had settled at the desk to continue the discussion as they reviewed the map hanging above them on the wall. Their tone was quieter. With the added distance, I was only allowed a word here or a fragment there. Too long. I understand. An empathetic no. Most of what I heard was a garble of useless words. I could not tie together into any meaning. But from the way they spoke and the way they conspired, I could tell that something sinister was going on. One of the men rose from the desk and began walking toward me, apparently to retrieve something from my side of the room. He was a big man, and as he approached, I could see his hair was unkempt and his beard overgrown. I held my breath as he came closer still, almost right in front of me. He struck a matchstick and lit another lamp that hung just to the right of the opening I was looking through. As As the light flickered to life, I saw without a doubt what Darius had sent me to see. This ragged-looking man had a C branded squarely on his forehead. A convict. He branded squarely on his forehead. A convict. He branded squarely. All right. So that brought us all the way to chapter 14. So we're about, I would say about roughly, almost halfway through the book. So we've heard of convicts before, but it's been a while. But we don't know exactly who they are, what they've done, and why they're branded as such. But we do know that they were hired for a purpose. So, hopefully, next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, like I said, those are my typical days off. I'm hoping to do this again because this was actually really fun. And it will only be about an hour next time. I wanted to do a 2-hour session because it's been so long. But next session we'll just do 3 more chapters and just keep doing 3 from there. So, yeah. Well, this was fun. This was nice. I hope you guys enjoyed the book, and I do apologize for all the weird mishaps that I had speaking and the lisps and things like that. It's been a while since I've read out loud, and my retainers don't really help with the S sounds anyway. So, I will see you all next time, I think. I hope, maybe, right? Well, whether you stayed here and watched live or you will be watching later on my YouTube channel, which this will be uploaded to. And if you wanted to rewatch it on my YouTube channel, it is the same as my Twitch name, K Shirogawa, so it makes it a little easier to find. And there is a playlist for the book, the Land of Elyon book series, so it'll be going there. Alrighty, well, I will read to you next time.